And hello, everybody. Welcome to FSU Coach Live. My name is Tim Baghurst, and I'm joined today by Mark Goetsch. He's at Pensacola Christian College, a former AD, basketball coach. Mark, thanks so much for joining me. Every time I see that commercial and I hear Brooke Niles talk about attacking her job, I love that phrase because a lot of times we have to do a job, right? And here we are, like, go get it. And that's the fun part about doing something you love. And I know you've done something you love for many years. So why don't you talk a little bit about how you got involved?
Well, thanks for having me on. And yes, my journey began with a coach in high school pulling me out of a study hall my junior year and just starting it out with a simple chat back and forth about what I wanted to do with my life. And he planted a seed in my mind because he said something. He says, Mark, I think you ought to consider coaching. I think you've got a knack for something there that you've never explored. Go explore it and see if that's maybe where you might end up someday. So I guess I credit Charlie Wellner in high school, a high school coach, with planting that seed. And of course, I took that information. I didn't turn away from it. I wasn't opposed to it. And I took that opportunity, began to think about it for the next year and a half before, attending college. And by the time I was ready to start my undergrad, I decided to go that way. I learned very quickly, though, at that point that it wasn't just coaching. I was going to have to be a teacher as well. And that is what really frightened me of getting in front of a group of students in a classroom. But then it was communicated to me, well, what's the difference between a gymnasium, a basketball court, or a football field, or a baseball diamond, and a classroom? Think of them as one and the same. And when I got through that mindset and took ownership of, hey, this is my classroom, this basketball court right now is my opportunity to teach young people a game I love and a game that they want to learn and love as well, that became a very wonderful transition. Instead of being fearful and going into it with trepidation, I actually got to my senior year of college and student teaching experience, and I thoroughly loved it. And then from there, took a high school job out in California, stepped way out of my comfort zone. Grew up in the Midwest, small town, 16,000 people, went to a small college up in the Midwest, small college, and all of a sudden I end up inner city of San Francisco, California.
Wow.
And I'm suddenly teaching kids that are, probably 5, maybe 10% of our student population was Caucasian that looked like me. And I suddenly had opportunities to interact with young people from, that were Filipino, Central American countries, Guatemalan, Nicaraguan, El Salvadorian, all that kind of, and what an amazing experience to get to know those kinds of young people that I had never been exposed to growing up early on a farm in Wisconsin and then in a small town. And so spent 11 years there kind of doing everything, teaching history, a little bit of driver ed, athletic director, coaching 2-3 sports, throughout the year, just fully immersed in that. And then the opportunity to come to Pensacola Christian in time. Didn't think at 32 I was ready for a college job, but the opportunity kind of surfaced, or, at least the opportunity to apply. And so I started walking through those doors, and I really didn't know if I was ready for that, but I decided, just going through the process, maybe the application, maybe the interview process will give me some insight as to maybe something down the road. Well, as would have it, the opportunity to coach here and now in my 29th year of teaching, coaching here at Pensacola Christian College.
You've been in one place for a long time, and as a coach, we see that less and less. We see more. I think the average length of a coach's tenure in a school now is about 3 years. Now, college, especially competitive, I use the word competitive loosely, but Power 5 conferences, again, we're not looking at a long tenure for a head coach. As a consequence, assistant coaches and everybody associated often find themselves moving on as well. Why or how have you been able to maintain your position in one place for such a long time?
I think this is really important for young coaches to listen to, because this was my mentality coming out of college. That last semester of my senior year, this is how I was processing things. Now, this has a little bit of a spiritual component to it. So, if that's not, in your direction, I think there's still some value to what I'm going to say. So I really felt like I wanted to go someplace where I could spend at least 5 years. I didn't want to sign a contract to start coaching, teaching, and then all of a sudden bail after 1 year or 2 years. I had a lot of friends who were doing that, and that somewhat frustrated me, because I was asking myself the question, because I had some long-term coaches who invested in me for 3 and 4 years, and I also had some coaches in high school and college that only got 1 year. Who did I get to know the best? The ones who I connected with for several years. And so, experiencing that as a student athlete, I said, you know what? I think there's value in going somewhere a little bit longer term so that I can invest in their lives for just longer than 180 calendar school days. But instead, there's a summer program, and there's a, year after year of that opportunity to kind of build those relationships. And so I actually prayed and asked God. I said, God, I don't care where you send me somewhere for at least 5 years so that I can impact these young people in a more deeper way than just something that's, I'm here for the season. I'm here for 24 games. And then I'm talking about the next job already. Or, I'm letting it slip that, I'm heading out the door. Well, then when the opportunity came to come here, I said, you know what? What I was thinking back as a college student, I'm going to pray the exact same thing again. I said, I don't know what your plans are for me, God, but give me 5 years at least with this. And so, obviously 29 years later, I far exceeded the 5-year minimum that I put on things. But I really think young coaches, there's a value in getting to know those players more than just those 55 practices, 24 ball games. I think there's value in those summer workouts, those weight room times. I think there's value to those social times where you're getting together, maybe at the house for a barbecue, maybe doing some team building exercise together. I think you'll have a greater impact on those young people if you'll think in those terms rather than what's the next available job, what'll pay a little bit more, or, can I win the conference here? Well, if I can't, I'm going to move on, and only seeing end results rather than seeing the impact along the way.
You've been there for a long time, and PCC, Pensacola Christian College, is a religious institution. I'm curious, what are some of the maybe constraints or challenges that you have as a coach in that environment that maybe a coach who is in your public institution wouldn't necessarily experience?
Well, first of all, there would be the spiritual component. Our students have to make a profession of a faith in Jesus Christ. So that's going to limit your group. Obviously, there has to be an interest by a student athlete coming here to want to be in that environment. Maybe a little bit more stringent rules, maybe some entrance requirements of a different kind beyond just a GPA and an SAT score. So those things are going to reduce the selection pool that honestly I have no control over. So, those are things that I have to deal with. We're going to go from there on that. Beyond that, though, if a young person wants to play ball, he's got a passion for it. He finds a major, some interest here that he can pursue academically. I really I'll say it this way, be very honest. Sometimes we get young people who come to college and they just come for the sports and to play that. And they're not necessarily thinking the academic. And I have taken a number like that, but yet my goal long-term, and here again is that relationship building, is to get more out of college than just being a PCC student athlete or just being an FSU student athlete. What can I leave with academically, socially, spiritually from this place that I can then use in preparation for where I'm going next step?
What about recruiting then? Because your pool is limited, as you mentioned. Do you travel the country trying to meet athletes, trying to bring them to PCC, or is it just kind of we'll see who we get and do open trials?
Well, obviously, we wouldn't have the national, say, recruiting base, say maybe that Leonard Hamilton has there with the basketball program. That's a given. So I rely a lot on my former players. Many of them have chosen to coach. Many of them are teachers. Some are athletic directors. They're involved with young people. So they become a great resource to pull from. Why not target those people? We do on-campus summer camps, basketball camps, ID camps, those kinds of things that many small colleges rely on heavily to have athletes come in, maybe as freshmen in high school. They're just starting out. But when you see them year after year after year, those relationships build, and then, maybe they're good enough to be in that 1% to 3% that get the privilege to move on from high school to college athletics. And then there's a few opportunities in different places of the country. I usually go to some tournaments, state tournaments, some national tournaments. There's one for years, the National Association of Christian Athletes up in Dayton, Tennessee, for example. There's a pretty substantially large homeschool tournament out in Springfield, Missouri that brings in hundreds of teams, and I've been there many times. So there's opportunity to introduce myself to athletes who maybe haven't had a touch point with Pensacola, but yet I'm going to them. And then I'm always thrilled to go out and do basketball camps at other schools and connect with athletes through those means as well. So those have kind of been my go-to things for the last couple of decades. It's served me well. Are there other things out there? Absolutely. But those are the two or three that I've tapped into and found some success with.
Interesting. I'm also curious about the pressure to win in an environment like PCC, where, as you alluded to, if Leonard Hamilton has a couple, 2-3 bad seasons, Leonard Hamilton might be looking at the door, and not just him, but any coach at a school like FSU or something equivalent. Yet you're also teaching and coaching, where most are just coaching. Where then is the balance between, okay, Mark, we want to see some success on the court. We don't want to have a losing season every year, but you're a valued member of the faculty too. Where's the balance? How do you, we all want to win, right? I've no doubt you do too. How do you balance all of that? How does the administration balance that?
Well, at the small college level, you don't have the media pressures that are influencing administration.
Sure.
Doesn't mean you're not scrutinized. You are. It's just not on the front of the Tallahassee newspaper.
Yeah.
It's not running through the blogs, or people's opinion on social media. So obviously that lessens the intensity, at least from the administrative pressures that come on you. And then I think the overall mindset, at least at our college, is, hey, we're trying to influence leaders to impact the next generation or to impact their world for Jesus Christ. So there is a larger vision to that. Now, winning's important. Obviously, it's why we play. Herm Edwards, famous statement, why are we playing this game? We're playing to win, of course. and I want that kind of pressure. I want to have successful seasons. I want my players to be playing their best basketball as the season goes on. But yet, I think there's also a bigger vision in place here, and maybe it doesn't get viewed at the larger university levels because of the media scrutiny. And we're able to view that impact of student athletes, that impact of students, maybe in a little bit better lens than those at the larger universities with the pressure of the media. I think sometimes, maybe the Division I administration, they feel that pressure from fans or from, whatever, maybe a little bit more. And so the winning-losing, the win-loss records maybe tend to play a bigger role because of those pressures on them. And I don't feel that. And I think maybe because our administration is able to stay a little bit more laser focused on the bigger vision or mission purpose of the college.
Yeah, that's a great point. One of the research studies I was involved in related to stress and burnout in coaching found that the win-loss was a very significant stressor at Division I. But then as it went down, what we found was that the stress and burnout didn't actually change. What stressed out coaches changed as they went down the levels. And so, for example, the Division I coach may not be responsible for booking hotels or making sure the bus is running. Can you attest to that in terms of what responsibilities do you have as head coach that go beyond you running practices, you coaching games?
See, here's where I kind of, succumbed to the whole thing a few years ago. I was teaching, I was athletic director, I was the head coach, and I was putting in 75, 85 hours a week. Mm-hmm. But I was basically killing myself. I was way overweight. I wasn't burned out because I love my job and I was focused on my job and I have a pretty good ability to zero in on the things that I need to, but I just didn't feel like I was doing my job well or the components of my job well. And so that's why I stepped away from athletic director first and then eventually, moved away from the head coaching job to now, being an assistant and helping both our women's program and our girls program just because of age. But totally, those kinds of stressors can really dominate when you're dealing with having to do the laundry, you're having to think about travel, you're having to, make sure that, kids are getting some academic counseling sometimes, other types of counseling. And all of a sudden, all these things are just on your plate. And it's just like you're trying to play a fireman, putting out all these little fires rather than staying focused on, let's have a great practice or let's make sure we're well prepped for this game. And I just felt like I was burning the match on both ends and not getting very far. And, fortunately, being able to step away from that, first of all, that AD job, that allowed me to get my body back in shape, lose some weight, get better, feel better about myself. Then all of a sudden the coaching felt good again and felt like I could tackle the challenges that came with the day in and day out jobs part of coaching.
I'm really curious, was there a specific thing that happened where you realized, okay, this has to change? Because any of us who enjoy our jobs don't like giving things up. We typically enjoy what we do, therefore we tend to take on more rather than give up to have less. Where did you reach that point where you said, you know what, Mark, you got to do something. It's too much. Because most of us struggle to find that point where we recognize that we're doing too much and we need to back off.
Well, the humorous answer is the scale said 302 pounds. Mm-hmm. But from there, when I can't go home at night and do nothing but take a quick nap to kind of inspire myself, that I can't sit down at the end of a day and do some reading for my own enjoyment, that it's just one thing after another, those are pretty good red flags right there. Now, I will say the weigh scale, I said it in a humorous way, but that was the red flag that said, okay, something's got to change here.
Yeah. Now, again, you're at a private Christian college, and those of us who like to compete, which are athletes and coaches, and of course fans who want to see wins, we compete hard. We try hard, and in secular colleges, we may see eruptions from athletes, from coaches, and so on. How do you manage the athlete who may be a little hot-headed and may not be able to quote unquote adhere always to the philosophy of the college when they're on a court, and how do you handle, for example, bad decisions or what you perceive as bad decisions by an official, where you may want to feel that way too? How do you handle those situations?
Yeah, and early on as a coach, I critiqued every official's call. Having a little, having dabbled in officiating a little bit early on, all of a sudden you see very quickly when an official's out of position, or wrong hand signal or whatever. Those things automatically, just
light you up.
Yeah. So that was a real challenge for a lot of years. I spent more time evaluating officials. I should have been the evaluator at the game and not been coaching. Some games, I'm spending way too much time focused on that, and that's an easy distraction. There's other distractions besides officials too. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be just that. It can be your bench not fully focused, so here's something that, kind of hit me a couple years ago. It's easy to remember, something that I've tried to, now not only practice myself, but as well as when I find these athletes that struggle. Here's the little phrase: control the controllables. What are the things in a basketball game as a coach you have control over? And if you can list those things and focus in on those things, you'll be a lot better coach. Now list the things that you don't have control over, and you better put officials right at the top. Now, it doesn't mean that you won't say something to them. You won't ask a question of them, because many times you are planting a seed in their mind, for the next call. But understand that call, I can't control any longer. It's already been made. So that needs to go in the uncontrollable file. All right, so now I'm talking to one of my own players. I'm trying to help one of my own players who's frustrated maybe over the focus of one of his teammates. Well, what control do you have over that? Maybe that teammate just broke up with his girlfriend or boyfriend, or maybe he failed a test that particular day. Maybe something's going on at home. He got a text right before the ball game. Maybe he's dealing with an injury and trying to play through it. Are any of those things controllable? They're not. So if we focus so much time on what we can't control, that's what I believe leaves us frustrated at the end of ball games. That's what leads to stress and, burnout. I'm sure, people in the sports psychology world could probably explain this far better than I. But I think those are the things that if coaches would just think about, okay, what can I control right here? And see if you can really target in on those things. Whether those things be your leadership, whether those things be the X's and O's of your sport, whether those things be the culture that you're helping to create within that team at that moment. What are the things that you can dictate at that point, or you can manipulate, or you can help bring along? And then, though it's nearly impossible to completely shut off that things you can't control, but at least learn to minimize those, try to minimize some of those things, and come up with strategies that work for you to put some of those things aside a little bit.
When you think about coaching as a whole, you've been a coach for a long time. You've seen a lot of coaching. You've worked with a lot of different coaches. Think now back to when you first started, and in our program, we have a mixed range of coaches, but plenty of people who watch or listen to this will be at coaching uh, at various stages, some wanting to be a coach, some who've been coaching for many years. What advice would you have for them, two or three things that you would recommend they consider based on your own experiences?
I'll start with read, absorb new things. When I first started coaching, I remember still in college, beginning to, having a little bit extra money in college and starting to buy some coaching books. I remember buying, John Wooden's book, or the very first book I bought was War on the Boards. It was a book about rebounding by George Raveling. And I just started collecting. And of course, back then, no internet, no, those kinds of resources that we can find online today. And so I spent a number of times going to the San Francisco Public Library and just checking out books on coaching, whether it was a coaching leadership book, whether it was a book on, how to get your team to play better together, the culture as we, kind of moniker it today, whether it was a book about player development or being a better teacher, like a Doug Lemov, his kind of books, just looking for those resources. Now today, I have no idea how many different emails I subscribe to, podcasts I subscribe to. And so I've got a plethora of resources from which I can continually feed my mind. I want to be a constant learner of the game. Yes, I'm 61, but I don't know it all. Even the game of basketball has changed so much in the last 10 years, and it continues to change. And I'm sure that's true for a lot of sports. Football, amazing changes even in the last 10 years. And so how can we continually be, or how can we be that lifelong learner? That'd be a good place to start, I think, as a coach. Second thing, maybe we'll talk about this a little bit later, but, find a good mentor so that you can be a mentor. Find somebody that you can bounce ideas off to. I'm kind of at the tail end now. And so I kind of look at my opportunities now as an opportunity to mentor other people. We mentioned before we started the broadcast, someone you interviewed earlier, Kaylin Ullman, our volleyball coach. What a great opportunity for me now. Even though I'm not a volleyball person, but I can still mentor her. Sure. Areas of leadership, culture, player development, things like that. So at this point in my life, I'm able to pour into other people. And I think there's a lot of young coaches out there, or aspiring coaches. Who are those mentors going to be for you? Who are those go-to people that a text message can be sent, an email can be sent? You can get, just a little bit of information. I went to a coach's clinic this weekend up in Atlanta, and there were two of my former students sitting there in the audience with me. I was really thrilled, just to see them. Neither one of them played basketball for me, but were students in my classes, some of my coaching classes. So, hey, there's an opportunity. They're figuring out, hey, I got to keep learning. I can be there as a mentor to them. They know I'm there. I think that's a good place to start. And then the third thing, you said a couple. So I would go back to the question before, and that is, be one who works at controlling your controllables. Control your schedule. There's going to be a lot on your plate. A lot, some of you that are watching, you're going to graduate, you're going to go out, you're going to be teaching, a few classes in a high school. You're going to be trying to coach. Maybe you'll even pick up maybe an assistant athletic director, some duties with that, or maybe an assistant with another sport. There's going to be a lot of things. Hey, my suggestion is figure out a way to put it all down on paper so you know exactly what you need to be doing so that you stay organized, control the controllables. about every week, every weekend, I try to just put it on an Excel spreadsheet. Okay, what am I going to do this time of the day? Where are my classes at? Where's practice at? Where's my workout time? Where's my time with Melanie, my wife? Where's my time to just enjoy reading, some topics that aren't in my field? Lay it all out there. Build yourself a schedule so that you can control those controllables rather than just running from one thing to the next. And of course, a lot of young coaches, they're dealing with raising or, having families, learning about enjoying life with that new bride of yours, that new groom of yours. You're having that first child, that second child. How are you juggling all that? You're gone late into the evening, your wife or your spouse home with those kids. How are you juggling all those different things? Hey, control those controllables what you can. You're going to have a lot on your plate early on. That's kind of the growing pains of coaching. We all have gone through those heavy hours, but if you can learn to control them, I think you'll be effective.
Great advice. And in fact, I was taking notes while you were talking. I'm curious, given the fact that you've coached now for a few decades, how have you seen coaching change? You mentioned the sport has changed. How has coaching changed? Is it the athletes are changing? Is it the coaches are changing? What are you seeing?
Well, obviously, kids are kids. They're still 18, 19, 20 years old. That hasn't changed. Obviously, my age has changed. So I'm getting farther away from the 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old age bracket. Mm-hmm. So us old people tend to say the kids have changed. Mm-hmm. But we're the ones that are moving further and further away. They're still 18, 19, and 20-year-olds. The thing I love about this age group, starting with the millennials, now into this Gen Z group, I love how they want to know the why behind things. I love how they want to have a part in solving the problem. Back when I played, it was the coach said it this way. He viewed it from his angle on the field. He felt that his way was the only observable way. And so as athletes, we just went with it. But I love how kids want to give their viewpoint now. Just last night on the court, I had a player come up to me, and he had made a little bit of an error and ended up losing the ball in a kind of a controlled scrimmage thing. And my first question to him was, what did you see? How did you see it? What were you looking at? How were you viewing it? I was looking at it from a completely different angle on the sidelines. I wanted his input. I think this age group loves to be able to not challenge you, but provide their viewpoint. And I think as coaches, if we would be open to taking in what they're seeing and now collaborate it with what you're seeing. And so with that young man, okay, he turns the ball over. What did you see? Well, here's what I saw. I said, well, think about this. And now I entered my idea. I didn't demand it of him. I said, what about this? And he comes back to me after we finished the conversation with something else. He says, I like what you just said. I think you're right. Okay. But I allowed him to get to that point as opposed to, maybe back in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, it was kind of do as I say, and we're going to go with that. There's one authority on the floor. And I just love the idea of the kids being able to contribute to the problem-solving process.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time. I know that the people watching don't always watch live. They watch after the fact, whether it be listening on our podcast or our YouTube channel. If they have a question for you, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Coaches, you can reach out to me via my email. It's mgoetsch@faculty.pcci.edu. And I love connecting with coaches. Obviously my area is basketball, but really, if you want to talk leadership, if you want to talk this idea of being a better teacher of the game that you teach. If you want to talk culture, I personally feel like I don't do a good job with culture. That's kind of an area I kind of struggle with. I want to get better. I read everything I can on it. I want to connect with my players better. I want to help them, with conflict resolution and better unity and motivation, all those things. But if you want to connect on player development in basketball, X's and O's, strategies, systems, I'd love to chat with you and open up an opportunity for us to engage a little bit. You throw some questions at me, and I'll put some suggestions out there, and maybe put back some questions that at least make you think or begin to process and come up with a solution yourself that'll work for your specific situation.
Mark, thank you so much for sharing your experiences and life and knowledge with us. I do appreciate it. Just a reminder to everyone else that we try to do these interviews once every one or 2 weeks. So be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel or wherever you're watching from. But on behalf of myself, Tim Baghurst, and Coach Mark, thanks so much for watching.